Deirdre. She's the Director of Social Work at Jewish Home LifeCare in New York City. It's a large facility with almost 500 beds, and she's working with the MDS and has been instrumental in these programs. She's currently a PhD candidate at City University of New York Graduate Center. She's actually the reason we came up with this idea, because she was involved in Hurricane Sandy. Not that her facility was flooded, but many residents that needed to be transferred were transferred to her. So can we go to the first slide that shows the film? So we're going to start with the film, The Big Uneasy, Katrina's Unsung Heroes, that Barbara will talk more about. So I have a short introduction.
All right, so we're going to do chapter 1 now. And
flooded streets, rooftop rescues, 30,000 people sweltering at the Superdome. Each of us carries an image of Hurricane Katrina. On August 29, 2005, Katrina hit the southern coast of the United States. Nearly 2,000 people lost their lives as a direct result of the storm. Thousands more lost homes, jobs, possessions, their sense of security, and their way of life.
I couldn't find my son. When I saw Circle School go underwater, then I knew it was all over.
I'll never forget the staff that was here during the hurricane, ever, and they knew it.
Their selfless acts with these residents, what motivated me and my wife and some other folks to do what we could to try and take care of them.
August 29.
People who work in nursing homes are often invisible, or even worse, they're viewed negatively. This film bears witness to their caring and seeks to make visible their selfless acts of courage. We have much to learn from them.
Sometimes it's to your ankles, sometimes to your knees, sometimes it's to your chest or head or up above the eaves. Water filled with chemicals, water filled with gas, water spilling everywhere, a city under glass.
People all hear the bad stories. And sometimes it's because the people who have the good stories don't really talk about it. And I hope people in the future, aren't quite so judgmental when they haven't walked in that footstep.
This film is a tribute to the staff of Louisiana's nursing homes who brought thousands of residents safely through the storm and its aftermath. They displayed extraordinary courage and compassion. We are grateful for their commitment and their dedication.
One thing about Katrina is that it brought also the best in people. It really did, and that will stay with me the rest of my life.
okay.
Well, this is Barbara, and I want to welcome all of you who are listening today and who will be listening pre-recorded. What I wanted to start off by letting you know is that three of us, Kathy Brady, myself, and a geriatric psychiatrist named Susan Leary, worked for 3 years after Katrina with three nursing homes in the greater New Orleans area as they came back to being able to be fully in operation. And what we learned from them was that how to operate day to day is a clear indicator of how successful they'll be in a disaster. And so as we go to the next slide, which is the kind of title slide for our program today, what I really want to emphasize is that your everyday practices affect teamwork in an emergency. And as we look at the next slide where it describes the 4 areas of disaster preparedness, what want to look at is mitigation. What can you do ahead of time to anticipate what kind of situations might be coming up and put yourself in the best situation to be the least vulnerable? And then preparation. How do you drill and how do you work together to really understand when a situation does arise, what are the proper steps to take? And then when the actual event occurs, working during the actual event to be able to be as least damaging as possible within the circumstances that you can control. And then afterwards, how do you bounce back? How do you make yourself solid and whole after a significant event? Now, as I said, some of you who will be listening will be people who will be actually affected by directly by a disaster at some point in time, and others of you will be the places that receive people who are recovering from and refugees from a disaster. But in case, being in a position where you understand what you're facing and you're prepared for it is going to be this way to be able to respond to it. And so if you look at the next slide, what this has is a website that you can go to where you can do what's called a hazard vulnerability assessment. And this hazard vulnerability assessment helps you look at a whole array of disasters that could occur. Some of the natural disasters, obviously a hurricane or an earthquake or a blizzard. Others of them are man-made disasters. Could be an oil leak, a truck that where an oil tank that spills. It could be an electrical problem. It could be very specifically directed at your own nursing home. So it's a fire so that the rest of the area is okay, but you're not. And it could also be a situation of workplace violence. It gives you a whole list of different kinds of events. And then what you're able to do, you're able to look and say, well, how likely is it that one of these would occur to us? So if you live in a hurricane-prone area, you'd not an earthquake area, you'd be looking at, okay, we're more likely to have a hurricane. And then the next area that it looks at is within any of those events, how likely is the danger of people being hurt or facing potential death? And so you rank the level of risk. And then the third area that you rank is your own preparedness. And so when you get an assessment of your vulnerability, it's what might happen to us, how bad could it be, and how ready are we for it. And that's a key point in terms of how ready are you for it. So as we go to the next slide, what I want to be able to talk through with you is some ways that you can be vulnerable as a social worker in the preparation. And while I know this webinar is aimed at social workers, I also know that you are in a team with your other department heads and the leadership of the organization, and some of what's shared here you might be able to share with those others who are your the other leaders of the organization and helping to be prepared. The first thing that I stress is in order for staff to be able to give you their full attention and their full readiness, they have the peace of mind of knowing that their own families are okay. In that clip that you just heard from Katrina, you heard somebody saying, I couldn't find my son. And we put people in a position where they have to choose between their family security and the people that they're taking care of in their nursing home. We have to do everything that we can ahead of time so that people can have the peace of mind of knowing that their families are okay. So you want to look at having some kind of a staff education program and some real guides and some real tips on how to be prepared. So where would staff's families take shelter? Can they shelter at the nursing home? There are a number of nursing homes in Katrina that sheltered families in place with the residents and also provided shelter to people afterwards when their homes had been destroyed. There was a nursing home that put together FEMA in the parking lot of the nursing home, another nursing home that opened up a wing where residents had been evacuated who were at high risk, and they opened it up to staff and their families. If you're able to, at your home, say to people, your families can shelter with us here, then you'll know that your staff have a peace of mind and also that you have a lot of extra hands to help out if things are where you need an all hands on deck. But if they're able to shelter at their home, then helping families to be able to really think through what are their plans, where are they going to go, what are they going to do. Another is communication. Oftentimes in a disaster, the phone lines go down. And so having a backup communication plan, some are outside the area code that people can call to once they get to a relief center that can be a way to leave messages or to let each other know that you're okay. It's interesting how text messages work even when phones and emails don't, because they require less of the power that goes down. Another area that is important to talk to staff about is copies of needed documents. In Katrina, when people had damage to their homes, they also lost things like birth certificates, Social Security cards, titles to their houses, and it made the recovery process that much harder. So if you're able to walk through with people, a way of being able to look and say, here are things that you need to have in hand, need to have them in a safe place. And for instance, as an employer, if you have some of those documents and you can provide them to people later, that can be a big help. And talk about the Red Cross kits, I'm just going to have you turn to the next slide.
Barbara, could you speak right into the phone, please? We have a few people who are having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, is that better?
Yes.
So the American Red Cross has tremendous resources for helping police to prepare for a disaster. I strongly encourage you to do is to reach out to the Red Cross area chapter that's in your area, find what resources they do have, and see if they can do an in-service for your staff. They walk people through all the issues that we just talked about in the previous slide about making sure that you have a place to shelter, making sure that you have your documents in, and making sure that you have a communication system. All these areas there's just very simple materials that the Red Cross puts together that will be a tremendous help for you in supporting your staff. So if we go next slide, what we'll see is a vital that now I think that we skipped something over here. Okay, no, we're sorry about that. So if you go to the next slide, another area that's crucial for social workers in terms of preparation is...
Would you like me to advance the slide?
No, right where it should be.
Okay.
It's to make a connection with a social worker at the home that might be the home that's going to help you shelter some of your residents if your own place is not operable. And you're going to be the place that's going to be the shelter for another nursing home. Social worker to social worker, you make a connection to each other's places, get to know each other's systems for coordination in the event of a disaster, and also each other's communication systems. Because you two, the two, from the place that evacuates and the place that receives people, you're going to need to have a working relationship ahead of time so that when disaster strikes, you're able to fall right into place with whatever your plans are. The issue that is key is that there be what we call a go pack for residents. And, it's a strange thing because until you've had a disaster, you tend to do things in a rote kind of way, and it's a disaster plan that's on a shelf. But anyone who's actually been through a disaster and can think about those minutes when you're having to figure out what you're going to do knows how important it is to have certain kinds of things prepared ahead of time. So waterproof material that has vital information about a resident, vital identification information and contact information is useful because when you're in a situation where you have to evacuate in a hurry, you don't want to be in a situation where residents get scattered to the winds to other organizations that are taking care of them, but without the vital information that those other organizations need. And so we're thinking through together what needs to be in that pack, how to have it assembled, how to have it readily in hand so that when you only have a short period of time and you're scrambling, you don't put people in a position where they arrive someplace at an emergency room and nobody knows who they are or who to contact about them. The other thing we want to look at is doing ahead of time with families of residents. Backup contact information. If a disaster like Sandy hits and you've got people who are families who are equally affected by the loss of communication and the troubles, how are you going to contact them? How are they going to contact you? Know which homes that you have a working relationship with so that they'll know that if something happens here, this is our sister home that's going to be receiving us. Let them know some other contact places where they can go to get information about how their families are, because the last thing you have is people call your number and getting no answer and just getting the phones disconnected. It'll just heighten their panic. Also, you want to share with the families some of the same material from the American Red Cross about their own preparedness, because the more they're in a position that they're solid in the case of an emergency, the better they'll be able to respond to what's going on at your home. So if we go to the next slide, what we'll do is go to another section of the Big Uneasy, just a very short minute and a half, that gives a feel for, in the Hurricane Katrina, what were some of the folks experiencing right during the event. So this will be, and just to let you know that for any of you that would like to watch this video, it's available for free on the website that's listed on the sites, and that'll be Chapter 5 that we'll be going to. Deirdre, I think it's listed there in the column. Maybe, yeah.
Yes, I'm just having a little trouble getting on right now, but there. I'm assuming people can see my desktop, and then it was just, let's see, is that it? No. Bob, do you remember how we got to that? I'm so sorry.
You were in Media Center, I think, or Media. Mirror. I have a DVD.
All right, so it's Chapter 5?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
To last forever. It probably was only, I don't know, 5 hours, but it seemed it could have been 2 days.
Wind was blowing, trees was falling. I remember seeing a big SUV that I drive being pushed through a parking lot by the wind.
The rain was pounding down. There was a little breezeway from the school itself to the cafeteria, and we had residents on both sides, and to even walk through there was difficult during the hardest part of the rain.
The lights started going off the morning of the storm. Every time they went off on our ventilator unit, the alarm started sounding.
The building just shaking when we were inside, and I remember just thinking, what would we do if this building blew away our evacuation center?
I was on, half of the whole roof came off.
Like a wreck without the skirt. It was just a boom, you know. It just blew off.
Blew off. It's like
just sitting there like ducks. We were just sitting there wondering what's going to happen next. Then we started hearing something go to crying. And that was it.
And we was on break, me and 2 other chicks, and we seen a whole house and a whole trailer just disappear in front of our eyes.
Yet, through all that, the facility, we were safe.
So back to the slides, what we're really looking at is, and we'll advance now to, let's see, slide number 9, I believe. Yeah, right there, psychological preparedness. Susan is a geriatric psychiatrist who was a part of a team during the work for Katrina, and also been involved in some support for people for 9/11. And what she stressed with the nursing homes that we worked with was the importance of having a sense of being in it together. You heard people describing in a number of different nursing homes in that last video clip that they could feel the wind shaking, the ventilators would go off, the electricity would go on and off, that a roof collapsed. When you're in a disaster, you really don't know what's going to happen. And so what you're depending on is your trust in each other, your ability to work together. And that doesn't start the day of the disaster. It starts before it. And so what you want to be able to reinforce in the day-to-day is that people feel known to each other. And it's as simple as knowing every staff member by name, knowing every resident by name, and knowing their families, having a little bit of a sense of being in it together from the social work perspective as well as from the administrator and director of nursing perspective. So people to have information about how things are going to work, what's going to happen. They need to have very clear communication beforehand, and at the time that something occurs, they need to know what their role is. An example, when you're doing some of the preparation, you very well set up a situation where you have a team A that knows their job is to be at the nursing home, and a team B that knows that their job is to come back afterwards and help recover. Because not everybody can put themselves in a place where they're at the workplace for 2 or 3 or 4 days before relief comes in. Sometimes you can't plan it that way because something happens suddenly, and some who are there stays. But then people who don't get there, they need to know that they just need to do everything that they can to be ready to come back in as the relief squad as soon as possible, because the folks that are there are they that relief. On the slide, we have some more information from Susan Weary. This is her website. I wanted to give it to you because not only did she help in 9/11 and in Katrina and after Hurricane Rita in Lake Charles, but she also dealt with Hurricane Irene up in Vermont as the Commissioner of Health last year. And she has a ton of really helpful information for elders around how to be able to recover, how to be prepared for, and then recover from a disaster. The key thing is that people have a way of understanding that resilience comes from ways that you work through the situation. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of the not so good side of things. We heard from one nursing home that in Katrina that with the hurricane, they spent a week sheltering people in a gymnasium, and then they got each of the residents placed someplace because their own building wasn't going to recover. And then the administrator gathered all the staff together and said, well, folks, thanks a lot, you're on your own now. And that nursing home, still years later, is having trouble getting people to come work for them. And before the hurricane, they didn't have a spirit of working together. Like some of the homes said, you can shelter with us, you can have a trailer here for as long as you need it, you and your family are taken care of. Those homes didn't have to worry about their staffing. So it's the staff stability and the ability to work together really comes from leadership's approach to this in it togetherness. On the slide, what Susan put there for us is some examples of what she calls brain boosters, stress boosters. And she talks about, even in a disaster, how important it is to try to do things like preserve good hydration, to get some laughter, to get some sleep, to look and know what those good health habits are, so that if you are going to be in a situation for a few days before people can come and help you out, that you're still building in ways for people to be able to keep their mental health and keep their support. She uses the expression, put your own oxygen mask on first, because we know that if you can't function as a social worker or as the administrator or as a leader of the building, then how are you going to be able to help the rest of the staff be able to function? On the next slide, Susan explains this even further. And what this is a picture of the brain. And you'll see that in the front part of the brain, there's the frontal lobes that handle what they call executive function. And there's also the hippocampus, which handles memory. When you're under a stressful situation, the brain automatically releases cortisol, neurotransmitters, endorphins, serotonin. And in a disaster, the infusion of those chemicals helps to sharpen your thinking, sharpen your memory, and sharpen your executive function. But here's the kicker. If people don't know what to do with all that energy, then they can be in a situation where they're kind of at cross purposes with each other, bumping into each other, not helping each other out. If everyone is well practiced and well organized and knows what they're going to do, then those chemicals in our brain drive us to be almost superhuman in what we can accomplish. But the key is, are we prepared, and do we know what we're going to do, or do we just have a surge of energy and we don't quite know where to take it? So, Merce, we're going to go back to the video, and we're going to have one more clip, and it's a clip from a nursing home that's sheltered in place. It's chapter 6, and I'm just going to have you start working your way toward getting that lined up for us. People a little note it.
Barbara, can you remind me where I turn it off? Because I won't be able to hear you when I get on here.
Yes, it's chapter 6, and it's right after the administrator says, I wondered what would happen when the levees did fail. So you're on chapter 5 now. You want chapter
All right.
6.
Should I start chapter 6?
Yes, please.
We were really surrounded by water. Came all the way up to the top step, but didn't come in.
Bob had gotten word that there was a breach of the levee. So he called us all into the front. Remember, all the employees going to the front, and we had a meeting. And his concern was that a family member had called in and said, get out of there. 9 feet of water is headed your way. You're going to die. And so the employees were starting to panic. And they were coming to me saying, Miss Denise, I want to help you, but I'm scared. I don't want to die. And they were just panicking and frightened. And so we had a meeting. We pulled them together. And Bob called emergency preparedness. And it sounded like it was true. The levee had breached. And so we were thinking that this water's coming. So now I'm thinking about all of these people we have to get up into the attic or up on the roof.
I had
So, the thing about it was to try to go from the foyer, get a ladder there, then put a ladder up on top of the foyer where they can get on the roof. I still have residents, some who are able to walk, who can, I don't think they could climb a ladder. Get them up here, I'm not leaving anybody. Miss Pippin made plans already. She had to put food up on the roof, water.
We have a tin roof, and I knew how hot it was that we needed a barrel between the roof. They needed something to insulate that because they couldn't sit on those those tin roofs up there, not hot. And so I asked the staff to take all the extra mattresses that we had and put them on the roof.
About 45 minutes had gone by, and I got a second phone call. The report had been false. There wasn't water headed our way. And there was a round of cheers from the roof, and everybody started coming back down. I came back in here and just contemplated what happens when the levee does fail.
Right.
Okay.
The storm was the St. Rita's case where two people were indicted for.
So, as we go to the next slide, what I just want to emphasize is that my home faced an enormous situation in a split second where they felt like 9 feet of water was coming away. And even though it turned out that it wasn't, we know that for other homes that it was. And their ability to call a meeting, to have their department heads thinking at a time about having food up there, having water up there, having contingency plans, critical thinking in the moment, and all hands on deck. If people hadn't been working together well ahead of time, they wouldn't have been able to respond in the moment for what was needed. So if the next slide, what we'll really want to stress is that when you're drilling, you want to make sure that everybody knows their responsibilities, that everyone knows who to turn to, that there are listed backups for who's going to do what, that people know basic safety tips, they know basic thinking. And that comes from practice, it comes from decision, it comes from thinking through contingencies and having people not just thinking about that in terms of a disaster, but using creative and their critical thinking every day in their work. Now, I'll switch gears a little bit on the next slide and talk to you another way that you as a social worker can play a vital role in community relations. The emergency management system is a system unto itself. It's kind of in a military hierarchy of people having very specific command roles and responsibilities. And their first and only response and priority is to get people safely away from danger. And what happens after that is not what they focus on. And so the fact that they can get everybody evacuated out of a burning building, out of a place that is about to flood, that's what they do. And so you saw with Katrina, people getting plucked off rooftops and then being put at various locations, and families being separated and sent off 1,000 miles away from each other around the country. Because what happened after they were immediately freed and saved was no longer the focus of the emergency responders. In a long-term care community, we know that to put somebody in a disrupted situation could be lethal for them. A resident who's disoriented and thrown off because they don't know their environment, or they're scared by it, or they can't express themselves because they have dementia, can be in a situation where even though they got saved from the immediate danger, they're not yet safe. And so because there's different languages and different approaches, it's really crucial that you don't make it the first that you ever meet your first responders to be when they're coming through the door to save you. And on the next slide, we have some examples of ways that you might be able to build relationships with first responders, with the people in the fire departments, the ambulances, even the emergency preparedness staff at the city hall. What you want to do is to be able to have them visit your building on site. Have them know the types of people that you take care of. Help them think about, well, we've got these 5 people that are on respirators, and these 5 people that are on ventilators, and so while we might be able to handle everybody else, these 5 people we won't be able to handle because they really need to have an extra level of support. You want to have them walking through with you and look and saying, this is going to be a great exit, but that's a great second exit. I want to drill with them where When you do an emergency drill, you have them as a part of it. You might offer to be a staging area for when they do drills citywide so that they can get really familiar with your organization. And you want to reintroduce people to how to talk with somebody with dementia, how to talk to somebody with disabilities, whoever your resident population is. You want to give an orientation to the emergency responders about caring for those folks. The last thing is really the first bullet. If you'll just go back one, you were trying to anticipate, but having an appreciation event. We learned from one nursing home that every year on 9/11, they invite all the firefighters and police in their neighborhood to come in for a breakfast and an appreciation. And I'll tell you that it's gone a long ways toward building those relationships. So you can formally have plans for having them work with you as a responder, but also build relationships outside of that. And then go ahead and go on to the next slide as you were going there. If an event is going on, if you're sheltering in place for a period of time while the electricity is down around you, after you've gotten through the immediacy of making sure that that anyone who's at risk is taken care of, and you're now in the bring down period. As a social worker, I think you play a key role in helping people to keep their spirits up. And Katrina talked about the importance of having group meals and being not just somebody grabbing a bite, standing someplace in the corner, but people being able to, whatever they had, put it together, be able to eat together, laugh together, pray together, give each other support. And there'll be people who will have different breaking points. Somebody who might just get so exhausted, but they don't know it, and they need you to give them a private place where they can just their breath for a minute or sleep for 15 minutes. The man who was just telling us in the film about the potential for flooding coming his way, he talked about going into the walk-in freezer, and it was hot there in Louisiana, but that was the one cool place, and he would just take 5-10 minutes and just catch your breath and then go back outside. So being someone who's paying attention to the emotional needs and the needs for comfort of the group around you will be crucial. And being a liaison with other helping organizations. If you've established the relationships ahead of time, they're going to be the person that you're going to be looking to and that they're going to be looking to be able to figure out what can be done. External communication, again, a plan B for when the phones go down. Places have an external website where they can get somebody else to post information saying, we've all relocated to this address, or we're sheltering in place here, because people panic in a situation where they can't reach their family members who are living at your nursing home or who are working at your nursing home. And one thing, a strange thing to realize is that keeping a rotary phone around, that rotary phone might work when everything else doesn't, because the rotary phone doesn't depend on electricity. And then if you're having to have people evacuate, really think in terms of social support. After Katrina, residents who were sent to a nursing home did not fare as well as residents that were sent in small groups with people who are their friends, with people that knew, and with staff that knew them. And so really thinking about the social grouping as people are sent along will make a difference in how they recover afterwards. And then we'll go on next slide where we talk a little bit about the recovery process. Resilience is the ability to integrate what has occurred and to bounce back. And what we find is that not all of us are very good at processing a traumatic event. And sometimes you don't even have a chance to catch your breath and go on. And so being able to help make some linkages for staff to counseling for residents and families, to counseling services that might be able to help them to be able to get their footing again is a crucial thing. And then if you have staff members or staff members who have lost homes, that the tragedy for them will be continuing, and they're going to need to have ongoing support. And so being able to help with assistance with the bureaucracy, help with needed documents, be able to help people get their footing afterwards is going to be key in their ability to be able to continue with the caring process that you have within your home. And learning from the experience in a way that helps you be ready next time. It's crucial that everyone who was involved in an event be a part of the debrief about it. That everybody be a part of adjusting plans so that you can learn from what you did, and that you might discover all sorts of community linkages that you'd want to strengthen after an event. So going to the next slide, what we're really looking at here is having plans that are well practiced. If you don't know where the plan is, if you don't know what your role is, go find out. And what's interesting is that most organizations just have a plan on the shelf until they actually have an actual disaster. Those that have practiced it, who have taken it seriously, who have thought it through together, and not just on the day shift, but on a shift, and not just with the senior management, but with every staff person, those homes always do better because they can think through there a detail we missed. Let's go back and fix it. Do we really know what we're doing? Does everyone know their job? Have we communicated it and over-communicated it? Do we learn from even a practice run that, well, we had the master plan down in the office and that stairwell was blocked and we needed to have something up on the second floor as well. You've got to listen to what people have to say and get their ideas. So know how it's going to work, in a disaster. But most important, if you're listening to each other every day, you'll be able to listen to each other in preparation for and during a disaster. So just as the last couple of slides, just we move on to the next one right here, you're really looking at skills in problem solving, in conflict resolution, critical thinking, and systems, ways that people pitch in routinely in terms of all hands on deck, ways that people start together with a quick check-in, how's it going, we need. If you've got that kind of a practice in place, then when something comes up and you need to call a quick meeting in a disaster, everybody knows how to assemble quickly and think things through together. It's that problem solving at the unit-based level that's going to be crucial, not just in the conference room. That you're looking at workforce and workflow issues and looking at who can stay, who can go. That you're developing people's skills all the time by using teachable moments. Again, you have to be able to function in an emergency. You have to have these skills and these systems in place in your daily practice. So just in the slide, I've got some contact information for you that if you'll just look at, if you want to see that video that we showed you little excerpts of, you can get it on our website. Susan Weird-D, we showed her website. She's got terrific information about resilience and about the emotional process of dealing with a disaster. The California Association of Health Facilities has incredible resources that are very simple, easy materials that you can use in terms of any kind of disaster that you feel that you might need to be prepared for. And finally, again, the American Red Cross. They've got great materials. They've got great speakers. Tap into them and let that be your first phone call after this in terms of your own disaster preparedness is to work with them to help your staff, your residents, your families be ready. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to you now.
Deirdre, are you ready?
Sure.
All right.
I'm going to be speaking. I am with Jewish Home LifeCare in New York City, and we have facilities in the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, and we have large home care and daycare programs. And while we did not evacuate during Sandy, we did accept people from other facilities, hospitals, nursing homes that needed to evacuate. And we also had a large population of home care recipients and daycare recipients who lived in the downtown area that lost power. So I will speak to lessons learned from both 9/11 in Manhattan and Sandy. We can go on to the next slide. The key piece, which Barbara's already spoken of, is really knowing your disaster plan in advance. And I think this is something we don't really think about until something happens. And so I will just speak one lesson learned from 9/11 was we immediately afterwards began getting email addresses of every resident who comes, elder who comes into the facility, family member's email address. And we let them know we're not going to sell it, we're not going to give it out, we need it for an emergency. And having a website available that communicates what's going on. Also importance, which has been spoken about establishing relationship with other facilities in advance. The next one. Key issues for social workers was when a decision was made to evacuate. I spoke with Terry Orr, who is social work director in Rockaway, which you may know was hit very badly by Sandy. And they spoke of the importance of notifying families what's happening, why it's happening. Barbara spoke already about the importance of having accurate information to go with residents and understanding residents' stress level And key piece Barbara spoke about was having people go in groups, not going alone. We found one of the hospitals that sent people to us here, send staff with the patients. And the security of having the staff come with the patients meant a lot to those people, because we are a nursing home, and yet we wound up, just to tell you a quick story, taking some younger people from a local hospital. And it was important for us to move some of the elders so they could allow for people who came from the hospital, young men, to move into a room together. That made them feel much more comfortable. The parents of these young women had a relationship already, so to be in the same room was meaningful, and to really just think of the little things that provided them comfort. It was important to have a sense of calm and providing reassurance to at this Rockaway facility. They spoke about when people came back to the facility, a whole welcoming back process. You can go to the next one. So, speaking of understanding the different needs, evening here in our nursing home, one of the mothers said to one of staff, what I really would like is a glass of wine. And that might sound really funny when we're talking about large-scale disasters, but her having the comfort level to speak with the social worker and say, a glass of wine would just make me feel good right now and calm me down, and the social worker going and getting that for her, there was trust developed. There was a sense that this person understands me. We looked also to assessing what are the strengths of the people who were evacuated and what helps them to cope. And social workers played a strong role in that, and supporting the families and supporting staff. Barbara spoke about when a disaster is occurring within a facility, it's also occurring for staff, family members, it's occurring throughout the area. And so at Jewish Home, we were fortunate in our leadership here. Audrey Weiner, who is our president and CEO, she was very much all hands on deck. She was up on all of the floors, communicating with the staff, asking them how their families were, thanking them for being present. Those moments went a long way. And to underline what's been said already, teams that work together when there's not a crisis going on, who know that they are respected, do so well when there is a crisis, because people are trusting of one another, they're willing to share information, they're going to work together. We can go on to the next one. Teamwork. The whole piece of teamwork, real communicating the thank you. So after the event, having the thank you banners up, calling staff in, people who went the extra mile, acknowledging that. During the event, shared meals mattered. Have staff come together and share meals, have meals with elders. And I also want to talk a little bit about how to manage information. What was really clear to us in 9/11 was the bombardment of information was not good for people. It wasn't good for the staff. It wasn't good for the elders, because constantly seeing these horrific events over and over again on the news just created more anxiety in the staff. It created anxiety for residents. And so when Sandy was coming about, we went around to all of the communities and said to staff, you're welcome to watch the news, but we need to put it on in a different room and not have it out in the main dining room where elders were sitting, where it was frightening them, particularly people with dementia. When you constantly had news of storm and pending doom, it was well too frightening, so we needed to balance what does staff need to know and how do we keep a calm environment. I'd also like to just really reiterate a piece about things by a story. We had a gentleman who came here from a local hospital, and the social work role of knowing that person, here was somebody who was newly diagnosed with a terminal illness. He was younger than everyone else in the city just about, and what was most important to him at this moment was that somebody go out and get him a baseball cap, because he was losing his hair. And he said, it's hard enough to be here, but I just want a baseball cap. And sort of like that glass of wine, somebody being able, and we were fortunate to be able to go across the street, buy a baseball cap, a message to him that what you're worried about matters, and if you trust us with these small things, we're going to be able to help you with the big things. I want to just turn a little bit, and we don't have slides on this, on issues that came up in the community. And Barbara spoke about teams and understanding the role. In our home care agencies, we had what was called the Eyes On team, and the team that was in a central area. So the Eyes On team were people who went out with flashlights to the downtown area and worked on bringing people food and water, nurses checking for wounds, bringing blankets, and the central area were the skilled nursing facilities that might have been providing the food, providing the blankets, but all being a central place for communication. And so roles were equally valued, but they were very important that we had discussed some of this in advance. And Barbara also mentioned the importance of being connected to your local providers, your police, your firemen, your hospitals, community agencies. In relief here that we had relationships with the different hospice programs we worked with home care agencies. People were calling one another to say, are you okay at your facility? Is there something we could do? What might be helpful? I think in closing, points that I would want to get across is everybody's a team, everybody's role matters, that we need to pay attention to disaster plans. I can tell you frankly, many years ago when drills would come up, I don't think I took them so seriously until having experienced some crises and thinking, oh yes, I do need to know what's going on. This is not just nursing, it's not just administration, it's all hands on deck. And building teams and fostering trust prior to crisis is hugely helpful. We have agencies that were walking, their facilities flooding up. They were lifting residents, as we heard in Katrina, just in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. Facilities were lifting residents up from one flight of stairs to another flight of stairs into a day room, making makeshift beds. And it was only because they were teams that functioned well that they were able to do that in the crisis. And I think really social work, just the debriefing, the coming together. And I'm going to end on the keeping a sense of humor. One of the things we recognized was that staff was sleeping over at the nursing home. People were tired. They worked day out, worried about their own families. And so we had a sleeping room. There's another group of us that were working on, well, how can we make sure we have activities going on and light things happening and some fun? So we have somebody here, Paul Paddiel, who's wonderful about doing drum circles. So he did a huge drum circle down in our cafeteria, and we forgot that it was right next to the sleeping room. So we had all these residents and staff singing and having a wonderful moment together, and we wound up waking up the staff that had been up all night. But yet, because everybody was such a team, they were able to laugh about it and see the humor in it. So I think with anything, humor helps.
I'm going to go back to the title slide for Barbara here as we take any questions from the group. So participants, if you have any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I'll unmute your microphone. I don't see any participant questions, or if you feel more comfortable putting it in the chat box, that's okay. Bob, anything you'd like to add?
Well, this was excellent, both Barbara and Deirdre, just getting a flavor. Watch the evening news. There's tornadoes, fires, shootings, all kinds of disasters. And I just wonder if any of our listeners, choosing this, have experience, if they could share what what they worked on, if it was a natural disaster or another kind of problem. So I just throw that out to see if anybody has some disaster experience other than 9/11 and Katrina and Sandy.
So if you put your hand up, I'll be able to unmute your phone, any of our participants. All right, I don't see any hands up. If you want to type in the chat box, that's okay too.
You know, while we're waiting for somebody who might want to offer a comment, I appreciate, Deirdre, your experience and saying that you didn't really you really know how to focus in on disaster preparedness until you actually experienced a disaster. And I've heard that so many times. So what I would just encourage anyone who's listening is, if disaster seems abstract to you, go in to your administrator, ask you the disaster plan, how you can help, the hazard vulnerability assessment, and look at the kinds of things that might be something that you would be at risk for, and just offer someone who would talk that through with the administrator to be able to see, do we have all these contingencies covered? And do the reaching out to the community responders. Make that relationship solid. They're going to be your best partner in a situation. Get all the people at the home that would be the home that you would be going to if you needed to evacuate, and also the people at the home that will be coming to you if they need you. So those are just preliminary ways that you can establish a core of connections, even if you're not able to set the whole tone for how people work together. But strongly encourage your administrative team to listen in on this particular webinar and to tap into some of the resources that are available. If you have an administrator or director of nursing who naturally are an all hands on deck, team oriented, then that's going to be that much easier for you. But if you're working someplace where that's not quite the case, you can still make sure you know people and that you know them well, because people are going to be turning to you by your talents, your natural tendencies, and by your role. And so being able to do the people part of supporting people through a disaster will be crucial. And the more you're comfortable in that role and have put some things in place, the better you'll be able to help people when the disaster does strike.
And something else that occurs to me is just the important role of staff turnover, that it's going to be very difficult to know your residents well and know each other well if you're working in a setting where the staff is turning over a lot.
And if you are having that, then that also means that whatever you might have done in January on disaster preparedness, come September, not everybody will be there. And so part of orientation that you might be able to do is to make sure you're getting from people some of that crucial information for if there is a disaster, which role would you be able to play, and do you have plans for your family? And here's a Red Cross kit. It's not just a one-time arrangement, but like you say, if there's turnover among staff, that any new employee knows that you can be a resource to them in a situation should it occur.
Another thing I'd like to add that was really poignant after 9/11 was the director of psychiatry at the time reached out to some of the elders in our facility for wisdom, and that wisdom was then shared with all of the staff in a debriefing. We had a Holocaust survivor who wrote about her experience, and she wanted to remind everyone that the sun will rise again tomorrow. And a simple thing, but it was so meaningful to all of us to hear that. And so I'd say, engage the elders living with you in what's been their experience and what do they want to share. And we did that during Sandy as well. People talked about other kinds of tough situations they'd been through and what got them through it.
That's a really good point also, to look at the strengths of the people who are there as residents too, and build on those strengths.
I have a question for Barbara. In looking at the total video, which I would encourage anybody on this call to do, it seemed like it wasn't a hierarchical. The administrator was appreciating, the nurse was appreciating the dietary and the certified nurse assistant, and I think that it just reinforces that all care players need to be on board, be respected. And is that pretty much a take-home message? Because it seems that you need the guy to get the ladder to get the people up on the roof, but you need someone to plan it. Was that pretty much that all people were just trying to help in the disaster with various skills, but really being more equal?
You're right on about that, Bob, because I guess the two parts of what you're saying are that it was not positions, and whether somebody might be the director of nursing and she might find out that her home was just washed away, and she might be in tears and being comforted by a housekeeper. It might be the other way around, but that it was a human experience. And at the same time, people valued each other's roles not because it was a way to separate, but a way to count on. And that came from the practice of it and the familiarity with what needed to be done. But then nobody stayed stuck in a role. It wasn't all hands on deck. And that was, I think, the profound difference in how homes fared had to do with how much on a human level they related to each other as people. They cared each other as people, and they were all hands on deck. Whatever was needed, it was a team approach.
One idea just from today's session is if anybody wanted to do a quick in-service for their own staff members and go to Barbara's website and show the clips from those videos and find out from your own staff, reactions to those videos, and it might be one way to get people really motivated to think about, well, what is our facility prepared to do, or what kind of things do we need to be working on?
There's a very concrete information in the video because the folks that survived Katrina wanted people to have really sort of step-by-step ways of thinking. Like if you evacuate, what needs to be on the bus? So if the bus breaks down, you still have food and medicine for people. There are a lot of practical tips, and it's a free resource meant to help anybody in thinking through what you need to do so that you're ready should something come up.
By your experience, did any nursing homes use Facebook with family members? Was Medium used at all? Do you know?
In California, it's a frequently used mechanism, and there's a lot of social media paying attention to in California. So looking at Twitter, Facebook, ways that you can have a server that's not affected by the electricity go down, but yet you can access from someplace to be able to let people know what's going on. There might be somebody who makes a text message to somebody else and says, please post on our Facebook that we're all at this nursing home. It was that way of having the communication occur. So you really have to think in the 21st century about this.
Okay. Thank you so much, Barbara and Bob and Deirdre, for making today's webinar possible. And we will be posting the recording of today's session on the website. It'll be available in about an hour for anyone who's interested. But again, thank you so much, Barbara, Deirdre, and especially Bob Connolly for pulling together our speakers and spearheading today's webinar. I'll be sending information out about our March webinar in a few days. Thank you, everybody. The webinar is officially over.